Good evening and welcome to the newest edition of the College Park Sandy Spring Health and Wellness Committee's virtual town hall. Throughout the past couple of months, we've had several town halls covering differing topics, everything from COVID and influenza to metabolic syndrome to diet and nutrition. Well, in today's edition, we are going to cover mental health, and we've got some dynamic presenters for you. And first, we're going to start off with Dr. Alicia Jones, and she will be followed by Dr. Sean Joe. And we're going to hold all questions until all the presentations are done. In my estimation, the presentation should be done in about a half an hour, 45 minutes. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Jones. It's all yours.
Yes, and I apologize for interrupting though, but thank you, Paul. Wanted to apologize first for not being able to show my face, but it seems as if my computer is acting up today, so my apologies for that. First, Paul did ask me to explain very quickly about DO. DO, all the little alphabet soup behind my name, Lean Six Sigma. It's DO, Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt. But DO particularly speaks to my training, medical training. And I am a medical doctor in osteopathic medicine. Osteopathy is a field of medicine like allopathic medicine. Allopathic medicine is what you see with MDs. Osteopathic medicine is the same type of training, but a little bit more, where osteopathic is a training where we are more in tune to not just the general treating and streeting, we are attuned to what else is going on. It's a training where we have been afforded additional training of what's going on in your body besides just what is where at the heart, because something else is going on in your body in addition to, and it's something that has been going on for centuries, but unfortunately a lot of our medicines that allopathic traditionally has been trained in hasn't come full circle in. So just to give some people a lot more information on, a lot of our training now has come more in tune to osteopathic and allopathic medicine, but just some background of it. The Lean Six Sigma, I think some people may have heard of Lean Six Sigma. It's more process analytics, and a Master Black Belt is the higher training in that process analytics, something that I wanted to do in understanding how to kind of design think in clinical medicine. But we're here to identify how mental health relates to our Black men in today's world. So our agenda today in identifying mental health, I wanted to give you guys also some information, some stats to give some credence and some information. As a person in clinical medicine, and also as I gave you some background on me, I like data, I like information. So I wanted to give you some information that provided a little bit more meat to it. And then cutting through the stigma of what is mental health as it relates to the Black man, and then tools that you can use to move forward. And then after Dr. Joe speaks, we can have some questions and answers. So in an introduction, according to the Health and Human Services, HHS, right here in DC, Office of Minority Health, Black adults in the US are more likely than white adults to report persistent symptoms of emotional distress, such as sadness and feeling like everything is an effort. So we understand that 50% of cases of mental illness begin at the age of 14, 75% by the age of 24. And there's some ways that we can deal with this, and we are dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. whether it is exercising regularly, whether with our nutrition, with our sleep, just taking 10 minutes within the day and thinking and taking time out for ourselves. And if it gets too much, seeking professional help. When it comes to our attitude toward mental health, we understand that 80% of Black Americans are concerned about the stigma associated with mental health. Now, that's a lot of things right now, because a lot of our community as a whole still has the stigma against mental health awareness, and it keeps us away from seeking and reaching out. And that is more often hurting us than helping us. And that's where we are coming right now. So right now we're coming to head. Generations that are coming there are Gen Zs and our millennials are identifying more that it's okay to not be okay now. So they're reaching out more and they're identifying more that, okay, maybe I need to stop and reach out more. And that's a good thing. But we in the other generations need to start recognizing that it's okay to identify that we need to be there for them when they are reaching out. Here, these are some stats that I have for you. So now Black Americans, we have 48% discrimination as a stressor in our lives. So this is what has been reported. And I think that's kind of low. So they said, and this is those who identified it as a stressor, only 48% reported discrimination as a stressor in their lives. But this is the highest of all the racist questions. So of Black Americans, 17.3% experience mental illness annually. In 2019, suicide was the leading cause of death for African Americans aged 15 to 24, with Black men being 4 times more likely to die of suicide than Black women. That's painfully sobering for us to understand. But one thing that caught me, and it kind of took wind out of my sails when I was reading it and identifying it, that of mixed racial adults, there is a 35.8% mental health crisis, mental health illness annually. And this is the largest percent of any group questioned of mental illness going on right now in our communities. So a study that was done by Mental Health of America found that multiracial people are the most likely to be screened positive or at risk for anxiety, depression, eating disorder, substance abuse than any others of any other cultural in our communities. That's a big amount that we need to identify, and we need to start reaching out and identifying this within our community. Now, this is something that I thought was particularly interesting about NAMI. And NAMI is a group, it's a National Alliance of Mental Illness. And this is a group that started this organization. It's called Cutting Through the Stigma in Mental Illness. And I wanted you guys to look at this because it speaks specifically to Black men who are identifying issues in mental illness.
So Alicia, we can't hear the sound.
You can't?
No, so I want you to pause the video, and if you click on the share button, there's like a little caret next to the share button, and go to advanced sharing options and make sure you just say share compute. There you go.
You got it?
I did hear it. Yep.
Well, I'm so excited to be here at Legends Barbershop. So just to give you a little history about the Confess Project, we were founded in 2016, working to train barbers to become mental health advocates. We recognized early on that the barbershop was a place where we could bring back and heal our communities. And so we're so excited as we work to get rid of the stigma around mental health, as we work to teach skills of active listening and positive communication.
Dante, thank you very much and appreciate your leadership. We're looking forward to doing even a wider partnership with the Confess Project and with you and your team. So looking forward to it. So as we start the conversation, as we know, our barbers are more than barbers. They're advocates and they're our trusted friends. When we sit in the chairs, fellas, our barber says, "How you doing?" And they're not just asking for the heck of it. And what NAMI's mantra is, we meet you where you are, not where we want you to be, but where you are. So how do you feel when you sit in the barber's chair in terms of interacting with your barber and their interest in knowing how you're doing?
You know, I think for myself is knowing that I'm in a place where I can be heard, and I can be seen. I deployed to Iraq in 2006, and in 2007, I was shot in both legs during an ambush by a sniper. And when I came back home to Rochester, I'm from Rochester, New York, I spent a lot of time in my barbershop because those are guys who knew me since I was a little kid. And thinking about therapy and things like that, I didn't think about therapy like the work I do now with NAMI. Back then, I was just talking about what I went through with guys who I've known pretty much my entire life.
I can remember going to my barber was that person that I trusted with all my personal information, my deepest concerns or personal pains. And that barber was just a trusted counselor. He was there to help me become a better man, because I was at a point, guys, that I didn't feel like I was able to be the best version of myself, because I had the whole world on my shoulders. You know, it was at that point, my mom was missing. I was working a dead-end job, and it was just existing. And it's hard to help save my life. It's so pivotal, especially in our communities, to understand that we as Black men, we just want to be not only valued, but be appreciated. And the barbershop gives us that sense of belonging, sense of community.
So to the folks that are sitting here with us, is there anything that you want to share in terms of what you know about the experience of when you come to a judgment-free zone and being able to listen and be heard?
For sure. So I can say my first time coming here, I feel like this place chose me. I didn't choose this place, because I can tell you, I was just standing right out there and this guy was cutting your hair, said, "Come here." You feel me? So I was like, okay, I'm selected, I'm chosen. This is gonna be a good haircut. And I came in here and we had a conversation. He was just speaking life into me, wisdom, and I just felt comfortable. And as a young college scholar, you feel me? I take insight and I take advice and I take everything that people say to me. Because when people have gone through, they say it to you, so you have to go through it as well. And it's like advice, and it's just like a stepping stone to help you in some way, some shape, some form. So I feel like you come in here, you talk about your business, you say what you gotta say. If you have something on your heart, you feel me, you express that. And it's like, you don't get judged, because there's no judgment, I feel like, because what you're going through, someone has probably also gone through as well. You just don't know yet. So when you speak up and you're the first to say something, you're setting the example, you're setting the stepping stone for others to say something as well. And that's how you get that judgment-free zone, because you can't judge what everyone has gone through. You feel me?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate that. And he picked you, you didn't pick him.
Yeah.
Now, how was the haircut? How was the haircut? That's what I want. Okay. All right. It's kind of dangerous me asking why he's cutting my hair, right? So, you know, you can have somebody come in you haven't met, and all of a sudden they instantly become family. How does that happen? How do you all make that happen as barbers?
You know, us as barbers, you know, we are, you know, we form a networking. So, you know, we call our clients, how you doing, send them a text, and because that goes back to mental health. You never know what they're going through.
And look, and believe it or not, a lot of your clients, they value your opinion. So they value what you say. So when you call to check on them and they're not expecting that, and they can be at work or they can be sitting in traffic and they phone ring and Stone like, man, what's going on with you, bro?
Yeah.
I'm just calling to check on you. I ain't seen you in a while. How your kids? You know, that makes the bond that much stronger. So if they were going through something in life, they would be more comfortable to open up.
Yeah.
Which in return, you know, that will give them access to any resources that we may have as barbers.
Yes.
You know, such as like the Confession Project.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes we as Black men, we don't want to open up because we don't want you to see us as, oh yeah, well, you know, he's not as strong as he should be, or you know, we use some other words, you know, and so sometimes we don't want to share that because it may be something we're navigating through. It may be some depression, some anxiety, but we don't want our friend to see us as being vulnerable, as seeing us as being, I think the other word is weak. So the stigma continues to grow. So how do you guys help us with that from the standpoint of, because we trust you, we're sitting in your chair, you're navigating our hair, so you're helping us with our look when we walk out the door, but our look is cosmetic. What's going on inside is even more powerful.
It's one thing being a man. It's another thing being a Black man and face the historical challenges that we faced and currently, and how we don't talk. You know, we don't have those types of conversations in an open way. You know, in an intentional way, because you need to see me as a man. You don't need to see me as none less.
Yeah, I speak from personal experience. You know, I come from a domestic violence home. So I think the biggest thing would be, I've seen a lot of different things, you know, growing up in that type of home. But you would have to create what you would call a safe place, right? Yes. It would have to be safe. And that's one of my favorite things, the Judge Freeze on. What says here in this chair stays here. And I think that's why a lot of people open up to barbers. Because barbers got a story too, every last one of us in it.
When you come to a barber shop, it's you and your client in the chair, give them time to talk, and nobody else hear you. You'd be surprised at the thing that I heard when people was in my desk, you know, they really give you their heart.
How do we reduce the stigma in our community? How do we address the stigma?
We address it by speaking positively. Stop saying words like you crazy, you soft, man up. We've heard that so many times in our lives.
Shake it off.
Shake it off. Ain't nothing wrong with you. Stop crying. We got to start to say, hey, I hear you. I see you. I feel you. We need to start saying those words to feed into the positivity and breaking the stigma. Because once we start doing that, then we can have the Confess Project, NAMI, and other organizations to come together and say, hey, we need to come together and start focusing on our communities. And
So that I wanted to give you guys a sample of a project that's going on. And that is through the Confess Project through NAMI. That's one tool of sitting down with a group that's going on right now.
you know, I strongly believe that
There are other tools, other resource tools that still exist and that are existing right now. There is something called BEAM, the Black Emotional and Mental Health Collective. There is the Black Men Heal. And this is a free mental health services. And these slides also will be available to you all. And there's these tools as they are, and they are tools, can help men wherever they are. And it's a path and it's a journey. And that's one of the things that I always say, because myself, I am a geriatrician. So I've helped older men deal with the journey, usually at a different phase of their life. But then I've also dealt with, I have young boys that I'm raising. So there's different levels and different phases of the journey. So at different levels, you need tools to help and manage through the emotional journey. And right now, as Black men, there's a number of different tools that we need. And I love, one of the things I love, and that's one of the things that I always said, every time the boys would always go to the barber shop, they would come back with stories. And the stories that they would tell about just sitting down and talking with the group, it was like a release. Another tool, the Black mental wellness. This is behavioral topics that give students mental wellness checks. One of the things that, and you know, this is something that Omega Sci-Fi has initiated with NIH, and there's a toolkit that's online that provides a whole process in developing management tools for Black men to initiate how to deal with rage, anger, and frustration, and to deal with it collectively and engaging groups, melanin and mental health, and ourselves Black. These are all tools and capacities that I wanted to make sure that you guys have if you need. And even as you guys are, because you guys are, I mean, as the D9, we are empowered with developing the future. So these tools are ours to help. And just as a background, I wanted to make sure that you all know, for as individuals, like I said, we all have the capacity and the ability to help those who need something, and just letting others know that it's okay not to be okay. To just ask people around us, we don't know baggage that people are carrying. Just ask them, how you doing? And letting you all know, for my organization, the company that I have is a consulting firm. It's called Vitus Consulting Firm. We are closely involved with veterans, in fact, that are engaging in crisis health management. And we have initiated, in fact, just won a promise award through the VA that has established a hologram innovation center for crisis intervention with veterans. And it allows us to intervene in crisis situations with veterans right at the time when they need it. So while we're starting at with veterans, it will slowly start incorporating into the general population. And our point is to have access of care, delivery of service within our communities, because we need to start servicing each other better.
All right, thank you, Dr. Jones. Really appreciate it. Great information, and we're looking forward to the question and answer. But at this time, we're going to move to Dr. Sean Joe. Dr. Joe, why don't you take 30 seconds and tell us a little bit about yourselves before you get into your presentation.
All right, good evening, brothers, thank you for having me out. So again, as I say, I'm Dr. Sean Joe. I am a professor at Washington University in St. Louis. So greetings from St. Louis alumni as well. And let me send greetings from Omicron, Fall 89 as well, out of SUNY Stony Brook. So brothers, that's a little bit about me. I mean, my background is generally, I am a trained social worker, trained to work with the psychiatric health of Black Americans. But over the last 24 years, I've been doing a lot of work around suicide among Black Americans and suicide prevention and the psychiatric health of Black Americans. So tonight, I just really wanted to have a conversation with you about hope. But before we get there, again, I want to thank all for inviting me, but I want to help set the stage just a little bit. But I know that time matters, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going through a lot of stats. but I'm going to give you a little bit. So it shouldn't be too painful. So please forgive me. But what I'm hoping to leave you with is a conversation about healing questions. And I'm hoping that no matter what I say or share, that I want to leave you with some questions that I don't think you can answer in one setting, but I'm hoping will stay with you over time. And then again, by engaging these two questions, I might give you three, see how ambitious I am, I like those numbers, but I will let you know. So suicide is a leading cause of death among Americans. About 50,000 people die by suicide every year, and the number has gotten larger since when I began in this work, which is about 20,000. Depends on the year, about 3,000 to about 5,000 Black Americans die by suicide. And I bring up suicide because at the end of the day, one of the worst outcomes from mental illness is suicidal behavior. It is the one that we know that actually ends in mortality or death. And then in between that, there are those who are experiencing significant pain, but it might not lead them to death. But we talk about suicide because, again, it is the culminating, the top outcome that we want to try to prevent. A little bit here so you can understand the difference between how Blacks engage in suicide and whites. I'm not going to take you through this whole thing. The thing I want you to pay attention to is that this black line tells you that as white people age, particularly white males, their rates of suicide increase. As Black people age, particularly Black males, as you can see here, their suicide rates tend to decrease. I want you to understand that difference, to understand that so that tells us what can we do, who is most important for us to focus on when we look at Blacks and whites in the United States. Let me get past this real quickly. When you look at suicide among Black Americans, it's predominantly a male phenomenon. It's predominantly males who die by suicide among Black Americans. Regardless of the age group, what the Black bars tell you that those are the percentage of suicides that are accounted for by Black males. So let me stick here for a second because I'm moving through this very quickly. It'll set the stage. So regardless of the age group, it's Black males who account for most of those deaths. Generally, suicide in the US, you see a 4-to-1 male ratio, but among Blacks, 80%, 78%, you're talking about 6-to-1, 7-to-1 ratio. And this has been the case since I've been doing this work, and I started this work in 1994. So know that this has been going on for a long time, and we're particularly concerned. So let me summarize it in this way. When it comes to suicide among Black Americans, we're talking about we're losing future generations. As I mentioned to you, when you saw the line for white males, it tends to be older white males, 65 and older, 75 and older. So among whites, they're losing past generations. Among Blacks, we're losing future generations. That means among Black Americans born after 1976, if you're under the age 45, suicide is a top 10 leading cause of death. If you're under age 35, it's a top 5 leading cause of death. And as I mentioned, only young Black males are most at risk, and those in the ages of 20 to 24. So there's a lot for us to talk about in terms of our mental health as we're looking at these sort of numbers. I'm sorry, that was not supposed to be hidden, supposed to be hidden. So what does it mean? So in one way, as we talk about this, we must understand how we think about ourselves. Many of you, like me, I have children, you might have children, they might be grown and not grown. We have fraternal life, we have other aspects of us, but how we think about ourselves as men matters greatly to how we experience the world psychologically and emotionally. So let me share some quick things that matter. I can't get into all of it. How we connect socially. I mean, our fraternalism matters to us, the ability to meet. This is why brothers meet up. This is why sometimes the wives are like, again, another Kappa event, or the significant other, whoever they are. But knowing the lack of connectedness really makes it very difficult for us to remain emotionally healthy, particularly many of us who are experiencing high achieving careers, and then you find yourself so isolated in that context. You're thriving economically, you're moving your work forward, but again, this issue of connectedness matters. It's not a superficial thing. We seek it out, thus we're in fraternities, we seek it out, we take vacations and time together, but know that that matters quite a bit. What also matters is a sense of who we are as men. And where did we learn that? Where do we learn that? What does it mean to us? What value we place on it? Our versions of masculinity, how we think about what it means to be a man, how we struggle with that. And you heard in the video that was shared, you hear it, that matters a great deal to us, as Dr. Jones pointed out in that video. So again, how we think about ourselves as human beings, how we think about ourselves as males, and know that we're often socialized not to necessarily talk it out. We're socialized to self-medicate. We drink, we hang out, we get high. We're socialized to self-medicate. We eat certain foods, all right? We socialize to also engage in physical activity. We go to the gym, we play ball, whatever it is. But all of that is also partly driven by our sense of masculinity. Okay? Whether or not we seek services and the idea that we mistrust services for some good reasons and for some others we just don't know that that also escalates, or as we should say, accelerates the level of intensity and duration of our mental illness. One of the key things we know that even if you have a major depressive disorder, Black men are more likely to come in when it's so far down the line of illness for a variety of reasons. So we need to pay attention to that. Again, all I'm trying to do is set the stage and give us time for conversation. And I know I'm going through this quite quickly because I want us to talk. So I'm going to stay right on top of this. So how we conform as men, whether or not we're cisgendered or not, whether bisexual or transgendered, that aspect of gender orientation or sexual orientation has a significant impact in how we see ourselves as men and how we treat each other, men to men, community to community, discuss it in families. So since we're in a family conversation here in this fraternal setting, I'm bringing up the issues that, again, we're now beginning to grapple with, because all of this impacts all of us, whether directly in our lives or through the lives of others that we care about or in our kinship or our actual network. So I bring all of this to say that, again, your mental health matters, but I'm going to leave you on these questions I'm going to bring up in a second. But no matter what suffering you're going through, there's one thing about us as a people. And Ben Okri, the Nigerian author, and I usually quote him because he says it so clearly. The most authentic thing about us is our capacity to create, to overcome, to endure, to transform, to love, and to be greater than our suffering. We have demonstrated this in the full history of the American society, where we were once rich cattle and then cast aside. In most of our communities, we're cast aside. And our economic value is questioned. And we question our sense of purpose, and our humanities continue to be questioned. So let me leave you with this as we transition into a conversation. And I'm going to stop sharing this so I can see you and you can see me. So the questions I would ask will encourage you to have dialogue with other men or anyone else. So one of the first things I want you to think about: who taught you how to handle your emotions? Who taught you? You know, we have a lot of broken people serving and helping broken people. Who taught you how to handle your emotions? Think back on that. And what did they teach you? If anyone taught you. So as we have dialogue, know that I want you to think about that question. Who taught you how to deal with sadness? Who taught you how to deal with anger? Okay, and think about how you do that. Okay. The second one I want you to think about is, who taught you how to deal with hurt? I am hurt. My feelings are hurt. My emotions are hurt. And what did you learn? I recall, and I don't want to get too many stories as a New Yorker, if someone stepped on my new sneakers, I was hurt. Was it because my sneakers got scuffed? Or I felt that my value as a human being was disrespected and I had to defend that? Because I know what hurt feels like, and I don't want to be hurt, and I don't want to accept your ability to hurt me. Think about it. Who taught you how to handle when you are hurt? And what sort of person or human being or adult are you when you are hurt? Whether in the job, whether it's a slight at the job or a slight in a parking space or a slight when you're in line or a slight if that brother who has less deference than you come and stand in front of you and go grab that drink before you and then wait in line, slight. My point is, it hurts. So how we deal with our hurt matters quite a bit and how you handle that. As a result of that, many of you are challenged like I am, and our challenge is to invest in our solid trust bank. The idea that we can trust and engage and connect fully with others. And in order to do that, one of the things I'm going to leave you with is to say this. It's important that we develop the language and the confidence to tell our stories. I'm not talking about on a big stage. I'm just talking about person to person, human to human. Because I can tell you, knowing what I know and having experienced this myself, I've heard the conversation that's my self-talk. I don't have time. Or what's the biggest one? Who wants to hear that anyway? What practical matter would it serve? It matters to you and your self-talk. So I leave you with the vision of telling your story and finding the space and having the confidence to tell it because you matter. If they want to listen, they don't have to solve, but you want others to listen because it connects you in a meaningful way. So let me stop there because there's more I can share, but I think we'll get into it as we get into a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joe. Great presentation. Again, we've had some great information that has been shared, a lot to think about. Now what we're going to do is we're going to open the floor up to questions. We're going to do it in an orderly fashion. I want you all to use the reaction buttons and raise your hand if you have a question, and I will recognize you, and that way we'll be able to get through the biggest number of questions. So if anybody has a question, now's the time to raise your hand. Otherwise, I will jump in with a question. All right, so while brothers are taking all that information in, I wonder if there is a continuum, and this is for either Dr. Joe or Dr. Jones or both. Has there been any studies done, or is there any data that looks at where Black people are, particularly Black men, on the suicide chart to show that they move from depression and anxiety to aggression and violent behavior? And is that like the next iteration of what we will see over the next decade or two? And hopefully the suicide numbers will change. But when I think about all the violence that's happening now, it's not necessarily Black people going and mass killing everybody. But could it be that these other communities have dealt with depression and anxiety in any way they knew how, PTSD, and now they're at the other end of the spectrum, and now they're just flipping off and killing people? Is that in the Black man's future, or have there been any studies to cover that?
I can share a little bit, and Dr. Jones, feel free to jump in. So here's what we understand. So first, let me reframe it. Why do people die by suicide? One of the main things that they are making a rational decision, whether or not, a reasoned decision impacted by their mental health, but they're making a decision that their death is of more value than their life. Their death is of more value than their life. So when you think about your question, know that the Black experience, we're finding more and more Black Americans coming to that conclusion. Impacted by their mental health, impacted by anxiety, which is one of the strongest predictor of Black male suicide attempts. It's anxiety, not depression. So I want you to understand that. But the question you're asking me is whether or not we will get more into that. As more people go through that level of intolerable pain and exhaustion, that's one of the things attempters say, they're exhausted, knowing or perceiving that their death is more value than their life. Let me put it in a context from Maryland, because you're Marylanders in that area. Frederick Douglass talked about this intolerable pain when he said, if all I have to look forward to at age 13 is slavery, this was the decision he was contemplating, just to give a Maryland context. And we've been struggling with that. So do I expect that we will engage in that level of mass expression of hurt? Because once you feel that your death is more valued than your life, then you make decisions that you're intolerable to other people's pain and the pain that you cause. I don't think we're going to get there, but I am concerned about our suicide trends because now Black children, 12 and under, have higher rates of suicide than white children, first time in the US history. So that means now succeeding generations are more vulnerable and males are going to account for most of those deaths. So do I think we're going to go in that direction? I think we have an opportunity because of what you're doing today and open up spaces for dialogue and men to tell their stories and their mental health, particularly in the bond, that you accept greater questions, you accept greater expressions of hurt so that vulnerability does not become a sense of weakness, but actually takes greater strength to be vulnerable than not to be vulnerable.
Thank you. Dr.
And
Jones?
if
ahead.
I may add to this, one of the things that went during the pandemic, I was on a council for the Veterans Administration that analyzed what was going on in the mental health awareness. And I was particularly focused as a geriatrician, focused on seniors in mental health awareness. And they were talking about seniors that were dying. And I asked the question, how do we know they are dying of the virus or they are not just dying of isolation and depression? And they could not answer that question. And there were a large number of minority seniors that were dying at the time. And the issues that were coming into place are issues that are coming for our younger generation now. And we're seeing becoming a larger issue now because of a lack of socialization that has come as a result of the pandemic of 2 years ago. So these are things that are coming up and that are now being studied. So it's something that is a ripple effect, and that is going to be something that we have to deal with now.
Thank you. Brother Taylor.
Yeah, I got a question. It's interesting that what you're seeing, the trends in the current research is showing that African-American males are committing suicide at a younger age as opposed to white males. Just recently, last year, my daughter has a friend who was in her circle of friends who graduated from Morehouse, in May, and 2 months after he graduated, he took his life. So, so she was struggling with that kind of a pain. And I guess my question is, as a parent, how do you talk to your kids and what do you say to your kids when something traumatic like that happens in their life? I heard you say earlier, who taught you how to love and who taught you how to deal with hurt, who taught you how to deal with pain and disappointment. And yeah, we're just not really taught that when we're growing up, and the question is, how do you teach your kids to deal with something that's so traumatic on such a large scale, especially young kids? It's something that just has us as parents kind of like puzzled. So I just want to hear your take, and Dr. Jones, your take on it.
Good question, Brother Taylor. So my first thing is help them understand that it's not their fault. So it's not her fault. Because everyone questions why didn't I see the signs? Why didn't I see something? So you want to be able to help them understand that suicide is very complex. Some people are straight A, high achieving, great things are happening. You say, well, what reason did they have to want to kill themselves? Like the young DJ who was on the Ellen show, right? People's like, you're a star. You got so much going on. You now co-producing the show. You're about to take off. You got 2 beautiful young kids. You got a beautiful wife. What reason? Because people are in pain. They're in pain that they don't see a way out of that pain, even though they're performing. See, pain is different from the performance. That they are out there high achieving and whatever. But for her in particular, I would say help her to understand that that's not her fault. Now, I would often say, and this is down the road, I would say, once they get past that and the sense of guilt or any grief, you can use this experience to help save another life. And the way you do that is to be comfortable with saying, if you perceive anyone to be in need or might be some way hinting that the language, I don't want to be here, or they start giving away their things, or they stop doing things that they like, and you care, be comfortable in making them uncomfortable by asking them the question. How are you doing? What are you thinking about? Are you spending too much time? I want to be there with you to help step out of that. But the main thing is be comfortable in asking the question. Or are you thinking about killing yourself? But it takes a little bit of practice and training. And the thing is, as we say, we rather someone mad at us and here than not mad at us, because I just interviewed a suicidal Black male. He's like, nobody really bothered to ask. They gave me the surface ask, but didn't really want to know how I was doing.
Yeah, I think that brings up a really, really interesting dynamic about this vicious cycle, because we're in a position, we're thoughtful about trying to understand this, but we might not have dealt with our own pain. And I don't know that there's been a whole lot of talk about if you've got issues that you haven't dealt with, and now you're trying to talk to somebody about their issues, that could trigger you. And it's really important for us to seek, the help we need. And if we don't recognize that we need help, I think it's really important for us to be aware that we could find ourselves in some mental difficulty. It's just a vicious cycle. I mean, and I'm involved in marriage ministry and do coaching and all this kind of stuff. And just from a married perspective, part of your responsibility is to help heal your spouse, my opinion. Because if Black males are dealing with these issues, PTSD, depression, anxiety, they may not know it, but they're taking that home to their spouse. Well, why do you show up the way you do? I don't know, I'm just mad. That's a sign that we need to be aware of, and we need to take that into consideration, I believe, in terms of this whole dynamic. All right, brothers, go ahead.
Yeah, this is why I said I want to leave you with those two questions. We are hurt people trying to help other people. All right. So examining who taught you how to handle your emotions gives you a chance to take stock of your ability to handle your emotions now, because you have grown, but we still have work to be done. Who helped you to understand how to deal with hurt? Because it shows up in everything that we do, in our trust, our ability to connect with each other, form real meaningful relationships, in our ability to tell our stories. Like if our hurt doesn't have value, because you have value, your hurt experience and telling your stories have value. This is why I like what you're doing here, to create the space to say that it's not only is it okay, but it's actually healthy.
Okay, great. I have another question. We talked a little bit about youth suicide rates and what we could do there. Is there one thing, I'm assuming that the one thing that we could do that would make the biggest difference is just inquire. And I think you said it, Dr. Joe, they have to be uncomfortable hearing from us that we're concerned and care about what they're going through. Is there something else that we can do?
Well, let me say it in the most positive way. It's for you to be comfortable asking the question.
Okay.
Let me ask you, everyone have seen, or you've seen someone who've asked you a question and you can see it in their face that they really don't want to ask that question? When it comes to people's mental health, again, the more comfortable you are, the more helpful you could be if you desire to be helpful. So warning signs for suicide often includes, again, it's hard to spot, it's complex. But we know that if someone is depressed, you can use some of those depression warning signs that's been mentioned. Again, people start having death talk. They have talks about whether or not they want to be present in it, or they're tired of this life. They start to isolate themselves even more so, because again, social isolation is painful, right? They would start to give away things. So those are the depressive symptoms that you might see. But also they might be very anxious and highly irritable. They might try to increase their medication and drinking a lot, getting high a lot, because that reduces the impulsivity. And then most important, the men and youth, if someone is in a crisis and they have access to a lethal means like a firearm, majority of suicides among Blacks and Black men are gun related. Because the suicide episode might last 10 minutes, but it depends on the means that you have to carry it out. All right? It takes very little skill to shoot a gun. It takes more skill to self-harm with a knife or with anything else. Both the theory and the literature shows that.
Thank you. Brother Gladden.
Real quick. The chart that you showed, white men suicide rises as they get older. For Black youth, is for Blacks, it's during youthful years and goes down. Has that been anything really attributed to the difference in those two graphs, where I'm more concerned of why Black suicide as we get older gets lower, whereas for, I guess, white males it gets higher? Has anything been attributed to that?
Yeah, so again, I'm going to cite DC, Maryland area for everyone. So there was a psychologist at Howard in 1938 who made a hypothesis, Charles Prudhomme. And Charles Prudhomme said, as Black assimilate into American society, their suicide rates will become similar to whites. So older generations of Blacks still have a very high stigma related to suicide, and a longer connection to the Black church, which also pushed the norms around these issues. Basically, what you're seeing is a generational divide, that it's the younger generation that every year that we've looked at it, from the 70s, it used to be 45 to 55 in terms of the highest rates. As we got into the 80s, it started dropping down into those under 35. Now the group with the highest rates are 20 to 24 among Black males. So the point there is that each generation has a changing normative views regarding suicide. Now there's both positives and negatives to that, but we have to pay attention to this, because it's not a one-to-one correspondence. What I mean by that is that for some, a negative attitude towards suicide has helped to save some lives, because they were like the shame that it might leave to their families and others. Older adults are more likely to feel that way. Younger adults are less likely to feel that way. So for them, they see it like whites see it, is that this is one of the options, a way to dealing with a difficult life. And that's in part what you're beginning to see show up, in my view. Not the only thing, because you still have to figure out the source of the pain. But that's one of the things that differentiates the generational differences that you're noticing. And for whites, again, there's a lot of things you can say. They have a lot more to look forward to than young Black males. So when they start to have these experiences because of health issues, isolation, marriage dissolution, that's their issues at the older age. But young white males' rates are higher than young Black male rates. So don't forget, they're also losing a lot to suicide. It's just that a majority of them are dying from suicide at older age.
All right, thank you, brother. Brothers, any other questions? I actually have one more. I really appreciate this information. I think it's helpful. I just unfortunately, it's in my mind because we see it too often on TV, where a Black male has been killed by the hands of the police. And clearly it doesn't matter whether the police officer's white, Black, or any other race. But one of the things that I thought that has stayed with me since the George Floyd murder was somebody wrote a meme on social media and essentially said, when I arrive at work Monday morning, I will be completely traumatized and nobody's going to know. And that stuck with me because a lot of times, many of us work in environments that are predominantly white. And for me personally, I don't think they have any clue that every time something like this happens as a Black man, it kind of puts us in a mental state where, just from a sheer numbers perspective, if I get stopped by the police, I'm worried just automatically, because what replays in my mind all the time is all these people that I've seen who've had really negative outcomes. And, how does that factor into this? I mean, our children, as an example, might be in good communities. They don't have what would be perceived as issues of poverty or anything like that, but they could be affected by what they see on TV just like I can. And how does that, should we be doing like just monthly check-ins? What do we do?
Well, then there are places like safe places, like barbershops, like organizations, fraternities. We look to leaders to organize those type of safe places for what I would suspect the young people, the people coming up. We look to NAMI, the organizations like National Alliance of Mental Illness, to organize those progressive type projects for people to talk and to voice and bring their authentic selves, so they can let go of those aggressions and to be their authentic selves. But I also ask that of you guys. What do you guys do? Where do you guys release?
And to follow up with Dr. Jones, recognize you're hurt. Because when you see that, I see it, it's hurt. That's one of the things that you're experiencing, because you're like, wow, how can this world be that unfair? Or how can justice be so unfair? So we're hurt by the experience, we're hurt by it. And again, how do you handle your hurt? So your ability to grow and strengthen your ability to deal with hurt and pain, and to do it in a way that, again, leaves you healthier, is the things you have to practice. The other component is anxiety. Like you, we're anxious because we know that, inequality and, the practice of dehumanizing us and how we might be treated, we might be killed, is a real possible outcome. We don't feel it's isolated to just the rural north or the urban, city. It can happen. So we have this anxiety around that. But again, like Dr. Jones, we don't have to accept that, because we can do something about that. Whether it's locally, you do something about how you vote and how you say what policing needs to look like in your area, is your sense of power of governance. So you don't have to get big on any big platform. You need to do it right where you're at. Because we don't take that time to make sure that policing is something that we feel we can control. We feel that someone else is there to tell us how it needs to happen. But locally, citizens for a region can control and say how that policing needs to happen. But of course, they need bigger laws. But again, since it's so locally controlled, law enforcement, I think that's one of the things we don't have to accept, that we can't do nothing, because we can.
Yeah, that's a great point. So one more question. Is there a listing? I think, Dr. Jones, you might have had a slide that had a resource where we could get a listing of Black mental health professionals. I would imagine that if I needed to talk to a psychiatrist or some sort of mental health professional, I might be more comfortable if I'm talking to somebody who, from a cultural competence standpoint, understands what I'm going through. And thereby I don't have to be in front of somebody who thinks, even if they don't say it,
Absolutely. Yes.
pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Exactly. Yes, there is an alliance of Black psychologists that is in my slide deck. But yes, there is an alliance, a mental health alliance, where they do have a network of Black psychologists and psychiatrists who are listed and are available for all that want and can use. Yes.
Okay, thank you, brother.
One more thing I would send you. So if anyone ever in suicidal crisis, you can just call or dial 988. That's the new national helpline, 988. If you have a young person, you can give them that number. They can text 988 or call 988, and someone in the crisis line will connect them throughout the crisis system throughout the country. It's the new number that they launched. It used to be 1-800-273-TALK, but now it's just down to 988 for mental health wellness. NAMI and many of the organizations are using that, so we can connect, so people get connected to emergency mental health support.
Wonderful, thank you. Brother Bullock, go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Joe and Dr. Jones for taking their time and for finding it not robbery to share their time and their information with us. So I really appreciate it. I've learned a lot today. My question is, among Black males, is there any correlation with the rate of suicide and their spiritual background and beliefs?
Yeah, that's a big one. So, you know, it's interesting. So there's, okay, why and how does it matter? Let me share that. So no one denominational experiences has higher rates of suicide among Black Americans, according to what I've seen. So whether you're AME or Baptist or Episcopal, you know, it does no Presbyterian, so no one elevates. But what does matter is that the more you attend church, the lesser your risk for suicide attempts. Now, why would that matter? Two, those who attend, this is why I think female rates are lower than male rates. Because you say, what do Black females have to be worried about like men? Well, Black females, not only that they're Black, they're also female. So again, they have the similar experience, but even furthermore, but what they do have that we don't tend to have, and we're now doing in these sort of circles, they talk to each other. And in the Black church, you get connected to people who talk to each other. So the more you attend church, you're more likely to be not socially isolated and connected. So that's why it may matter to some extent. And then the more you're in church, and depends on how orthodox you are, because Blacks tend to have very orthodox view, more so than whites, about participating in religious activity. Those normative ideas that, you know, suicide is a sin sticks more with you. So that's how it might matter in the risk for suicide. The connection, the support you might get from church, and whether or not you believe in that normative view, and how salient it is in your life might have an impact on your risk for suicide.
Okay, thank you very much. And as far as your question on who taught you how to deal with your emotions and your feelings, my father was a Baptist minister, and how I saw him live his life helped me deal with my emotional crisis during my life. And he turned to the word, to God. And so that's what I was taught. So when I saw those crises come in my life, that's what I did. And it helped me tremendously, you know, it did. And I try to teach my son and my daughter the same type of response to their emotions and their emotional crisis. And I try to leave it open to them to come talk to me, to let them know that even though I'm your father and I'm in charge, I'm not going to judge you. I'm here to listen to you and help you. You know, there may be times when you have to step in and say, no, it's not going to be that way. But I try to do it in a way that I leave it open for them to be feel free to come talk to me about anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother. And lower your hand. Is there a practical way we could do self-checks on ourselves? Like, I'm just making this up, like 2 or 3 steps that we could do every day, every week, whatever, just to kind of do a self-check? Is there anything like that that would be useful?
Well, some have, even just in mental health, Some even say meditation, even taking 5 and 10 minutes, just taking quiet time and just taking a minute, 5, 10 minutes, and taking personal time for yourself and allowing those time for yourself where there's not a lot of noise, where there's not people coming and asking you questions, work, home, just taking a personal time for yourself, taking time to breathe and concentrating on things like just breathing in and out. It's been practiced for centuries, and that alone allows for things like stressors to release. That alone can even allow things like blood pressure to drop. It can allow so many different things to release from your body, and it allows for us to settle and relax and then to begin again.
All right, thank you.
I will add, as you're meditating, think about what hurt you, what happened to you. So often we want people to understand that when we have these experiences, it's something that happened to us, something hurt us. So not to say it's just you, something happened to you, it's not you. So as you're thinking about that meditation, and I think it's right, just brief and quick. One of the things I do very simply, because there's always a lot of things that I value that cause me stress, right? Because you remember, it's how you interpret the world. So it could either matter to me or don't, and I could do it in a healthy way or not. But one of the simple things I often do is one, of course, give thanks for the day. I turn to that aspect of the word. But I'm better now of understanding what hurt have I experienced, and then I reflect on how much it matters to to my happiness goal. And it's not an easy task. It takes time. But to acknowledge the hurt allows you to better understand, what is bothering me and why am I upset, or why am I irritable, or why am I feeling, sad. And I'm able then to process it, to be like, okay, and then I'm better at being able to, through my own meditation, brief, it's 5-10 minutes. And then how do I move forward? Because I'm really focused on the happiness that I know is possible.
Thank you. Brother Gladden?
Quick question, is depression and loneliness synonymous or different, or the same thing or different?
One is a sign, one is an experience of being depressed. So because you're lonely doesn't mean you're depressed, all right? But when you're depressed, particularly clinically depressed, there's a level of automatic thought and rumination that you find yourself difficult to control, that you find challenging to be able to snap out of it, as some people might say, all right? But if you're lonely, that could further heighten the awareness of the depression and the depth of the depression and the intensity of the depression. Because some of us, there are times we want to be alone. Like, I got to get away from these kids. I got to get away from these people, right? Real talk. So sometimes it's healthy to be alone or in different spaces. So you know what? I don't need a whole lot. I just want to be able to go hit the beach and just me and, read whatever book or I'm writing or have a cocktail or whatever. So loneliness, being alone is not always bad, but again, isolation is different from loneliness, or being alone, I should say. When you're isolated, that's different.
Awesome. Well, brothers, we're going to start to wind down. If there are any final questions, now would be a great time to be recognized. If there are no other questions, I just want to take an opportunity to thank our presenters. Wonderful presentations, great information. Definitely looking forward to being able to share the presentations. And wow, I'm really grateful that we had the opportunity to cover this. Any last remarks from anyone?
Dr. Jones?
No, thank you all. Thank you all. It was very good, and I appreciate being asked to come, and I hope that just moving forward, we can do a lot more and do a lot more for young men moving forward, and you all as a collective.
And I want to thank you, brothers, for the invitation. Thank my son, Ron Taylor, as well, and others for connecting me here. So, brothers, I hope to see y'all in Tampa, and take giant steps. Take giant steps to accept that happiness is possible, and take giant steps to just reach out, not to the world, but to those in your immediate circle. Ask them how they're doing and share a smile with them. People say that's too simple. Trust me. I have stories of people who attempted suicide, say nobody even bothered to smile at me or even to check in on me. So take those giant steps.
Fantastic. And thank you again. With that, we are going to end this town hall. We do have several that are coming up. If you want to be notified on future presentations, drop your email in the chat, and we'll be sure to make sure you get notified. We do have town halls that are scheduled through the end of this year, covering a wide array of topics. And we're happy to have you involved, and we're looking forward to continuing on with this town hall series. With that, we're going to sign off, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob Bias.